Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
This episode is brought to you by Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business. Want to advance your career or switch fields? An MBA from Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business can help. Earn your degree from a top-ranked business school with a thought-provoking curriculum, one-on-one leadership coaching, support from experienced career counselors, and full-time, online hybrid, and accelerated MBA formats. Join the intelligent future. Visit cmu.edu/Tepper to learn more.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Sesh. Today I got a special guest. Thelma, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Thelma Tamez from Encantada Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I support organizations when it comes to their diversity, equity, and inclusion, and employee engagement, from one-time trainings to really being in retainers with them and helping them create their DE&I roadmap. DE&I really supports, it's a hub, and that's the way that I like to see it, because you work with every part of the organization, from talent acquisition, from compensations, learning and development, really supplier diversity, even your community or employer branding. It's what it impacts in an organization.
Okay, well, before we get into that, we were talking off camera, and you live a very structured life.
I do.
So kind of touch on that, because I'm interested in that.
Well, I've created systems that allow me to really create a good life that it's a very fast-paced life, but at the same time, very slow. And it's my work, it's very fast, and sometimes I have to travel for work. But when it comes to my day-to-day routine, regardless of where I'm at, I keep the same structure. I go to sleep around the same time. I'm very vocal, and I have very supportive friends that at this point, they are very respectful of my sleeping time. I wake up early, I go to the gym. But in a sense, for me, I'm very flexible as to listening as well to my body. Like, for example, just because it was a Tuesday, I've already worked out Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Today, my body didn't feel that it was ready to work out. So I skipped my workout. So I created a rest day. So I'm flexible in a sense where it doesn't have to be a rest day Saturday, Sunday. I create the rest day when my body asks for it. But I do believe in time. I think we have to be very honest and very respectful from your time and my time. And I think it's one of those things that we can never get back. So I'm very mindful when it comes to timing and really building a schedule around that as well.
How did you come about that? Because I feel like I only learned that later in my 30s, right? So I was like, shit, I listened to motivation for a long time. And then I was like, I actually have to do stuff. And it's not only doing stuff, you kind of have to do things purposefully and in a certain amount of time. So you only have a certain amount of time to do these things. And I felt like for me, I was coming from the part where, like, during COVID, like, I was drinking every single day. My life was like going off the rails, right? And I came to terms like, oh shit. I looked at myself in the mirror and had that like really hard conversation. And I was like, you got to do something about this life, right? So then I purposefully started living through that. And I found myself like become very boring. And like I didn't go out anymore. My drinking has gone down by like 99%. And my friends are still hanging out and they're having a great time. And I want to go, but I can't. Like I feel like I have too many things to do in this life that I can't fulfill them if I'm doing that stuff, because I get hungover, I'm tired. So can you kind of touch on that, how you became like?
Yes, and I'm not a self-help or any type of expert. I will not do a disservice and insult someone that has actually done through that, but I know what works for me as an individual, or even with the food and everything that I eat or I consume. And we're always hearing the fact of like, oh, be authentic and be like this whole eras that we're in, but I think one of the that we don't hear a lot is, and I think that I like to live by, is having ownership. Own your day, own your routine, own your responsibilities, own what works for you. Like really have that ownership aspect. So for me, I know you mentioned boring, but what really defines boring? If it's fulfilling you, and this is my way of being, this is my excitement, and this is what I thrive on. And
I guess what it is that I was told, like, I'm not the same person anymore. Like you changed and you're different now. It's like, well, I mean, you're supposed to change.
Yeah. So quick story, and I'm probably all about stories, and I can't even recall where I heard this because I read a lot and I'm always listening to things. But as you're growing and you want to be your environment, you're going to have to adapt and change towards the person that you want to be. So for example, I think and I want to get his name right, Michael Vick, the football player that unfortunately got into trouble, or even Aaron Rodriguez. Super talented individuals from the Patriots. Talented individuals, great careers with gain money, but they never changed their environment. Talent, resources, money, contracts, but they chose to still stay within the same environment that they grew up with the same people that they grew up with. And unfortunately, as you're improving or growing in life or growing or changing, not everyone is going to shift to the same environment. And I always tell folks, like, you can't save them all. And you have to be able to cherish that individual. So another way of being is that we have individuals that I have friends that I could go on vacations with, and I could spend 3 days with them. And I have friends that I could only be on the phone with them for 3 minutes. Why? Because of the conversations that we're having. And I love them. They might be from my younger generations or friends, but I can only give you 3 minutes because our conversations are not going in the same path. And it's okay because you're choosing. Doesn't mean that I don't respect you, I don't admire you, but that's and one of the phrases that I'm always you're gonna hear me say is like, not my monkey, not my circus. So now if you want to be part of my circus, like, this is where I'm heading. And this is, I'll text you, hey, do you want to go on a walk at 5 p.m? It's a great day, but let's connect over that. Or why do we always have to build it around like hanging out? Or let's go play tennis, or let's go work out together, or let's go do a yoga class together, versus actually building let's go out at 11 at night and getting drunk. Or not only that, you go back to, for example, and I'm going to be very honest, I love birria tacos. Birria tacos are my favorite. Like, they're the best. And now thinking back, it's probably the reason I didn't wake up to go to the gym today, because I ate birria tacos yesterday.
Heavy dinner.
Why? And I had it at 5:30 in the afternoon. That was like my dinner. But I usually, when I get a birria tacos, I share them with my mom. And I didn't, because I was in the office and I ordered them to go, and I didn't prep a dinner because I got backed up with meetings. So then this morning, my body felt it. And it's a ripple effect, mind you. So we know how you feel afterwards. Or even, like, for example, like the drinking, you need to be able to identify, okay, what kind of individual do I become when I'm around these people? Like, am I like aggressive? But it goes back to having self-awareness and owning. Like being comfortable, and also identifying like what parts do I own and how much am I adding to this relationship, or how much act. A lot of times we try to blame our circumstances, but when it comes to the things that happen, but at the end of the day, you have control. There's healthy food everywhere. And I tell folks.
So let's stick on that, because that's an interesting topic, because we live in McAllen in the Rio Grande Valley, where we are the top 10 most obese cities in the nation. In the nation. That's crazy, right? Yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, remember we shared about, it goes back to ownership, but two, also our families and our surroundings there could be the great allies and supporters, but at the same time, they could be their worst enemies. And in a sense where you might think like little acts that could occur that hurt you in a sense. For example, sometimes, and I remember being raised with my family and my grandmas, where if there was the last taco, they'll be like, no, eat the last taco. Yeah. You do not leave the last taco, because God forbid we throw away one taco, and you're, as a child, like, you're full and you're continuing, like, keep going and eating. So that's one. Two, it's the whole adding emotional to the food. So another.
I'm an emotional eater. For 100%. Like, I'll go after a big bag of candies. I'll eat them all too. It's just horrible, but I'm an emotional eater.
It becomes, you add it. So why should I? And it goes back to owning your emotions. And it's saying, why should I allow that food to control my emotions? Like, Why am I going to get set? There's clearly something missing if I'm comfortable with the fact that I need this. And I get it. Like, we all go through these things, but it's a sense of like, okay, how many am I incorporating? Is it a one-off, or am I really living my life through like, let me go stop? Okay. And if you go to Chick-fil-A, because Chick-fil-A is one of my favorites, there's ways to remove the bun. Know how much, and I go back to not being an expert when it comes to, I'm not a nutritionist. Sure. I'm not a gym,
and I would never. For you.
I know, but I know how many calories I need to eat, and I know what workout I need to consume. And
so let's stay on that, because I feel like I was talking to my buddy, my trainer yesterday.
Yeah.
And he was talking about a certain place where he goes and trains outside, right? And nobody really knows how to work out. Nobody really knows how to eat. And they have all this beautiful equipment that's never being used. Yeah. So that goes back to the fact that most people just don't know what to do. So how do you know how many calories you need to eat?
Well, I use a calculator.
So like, explain that. Explain that.
I'm like, it's as simple, for example, and it takes time. And I know people are doing other things, and it goes back to being comfortable with the boring.
See, I will say this: your competence in knowing exactly is the same thing I know, because I struggled with obesity. I was 250 pounds. I got down to 186. Now I lift weights all the time, so that's my escape. And I started watching what I eat, calorie counting. Yeah, but that took about a year and a half.
It does take, and be comfortable with the boring. And people are always chasing what's trending, the
instant
keto
gratification,
or well, they try to. We folks are all around. We're always like chasing trends and what's new and the ketos. And if you probably Google, there's probably like thousands of different diets of like the fasting.
I've tried them all.
Like the fasting. Stick to your basics. Like one, know first of all where you're at, because like exactly like get in the weights and find out exactly how much you weighed and find out. And then if you look for it, and I could always share the link with you, but there's when you input it, and if you're trying to lose, it tells you how many grams of protein, how many grams of carbs and of fats you're supposed to, and of course what milestones you need to be hitting based on your target goal that you're trying to reach. Now, you also need to be very mindful that it's a 7-day routine. Like it's not where, over and over, and create systems where like, okay, I already know what I like. I don't eat egg. And sometimes people are like, oh, eat egg. And if you, the what is the other things called? The egg whites. And why am I going to put myself through that hell and cost myself to not be successful because I'm gonna eat egg and everybody eats egg?
Why do people do that?
I'm like, it's find what works for you. And I think it goes back to, because just because it worked for me, that doesn't mean that it's a cookie cutter approach for everyone else. Right. Like find what works for you, identifying your resources. I know that we all have like either children's or people have lives or work. Well, take your, like, is there a gym around your area? Why are you gonna go to the trendy gym that's 30 minutes away from your house when there's one 5 minutes away from you? And now every time that you're going to drive, you're going to use the excuse of like driving because you want to go to that trendy gym. Yeah. So you're adding things that are hurdles along the way that are going to cost you to not make them achievable. So
and you're absolutely right, because I started like counting my calories and started bringing my own food all the time and I found out that like fasting works for me. Yeah. Like I'll fast at like 2 p.m. and then I'll eat. But it works for me because like it keeps my brain clean.
Fasting is great for if you deal with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
don't take our advice.
Don't take my advice. But if you research, and I've started to, because Alzheimer's and dementia runs in my family. Like, okay, well,
it's prevalent here in the Rio Grande Valley. Yeah.
So those things, it's like fasting. That apparently, like, if you get to the 6th day, that's when your whole like brain's. And I saw someone that did that. But I'm not an expert, so I haven't even explored it. But I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I wonder how that benefits your body and your brain.
It's interesting because the fasting has really changed my life. Like, it's helped me in a ton of ways. And I tell people that it's like, no, I can never not eat that long. It's like, just try it.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I need my sugar. So that just shows you like how much people are addicted to like food.
And it goes back to recently, I go back, my nephew, he runs pretty much our schedule for my family and I, but he was having like a meltdown, like any little child, 3-year-old, and he was crying. And the first thing that my mom wanted to do at that time, sweetheart, of course, like any other grandma, give him food. Yeah. And I'm like, why would you give him? So he could stop crying. I'm like, well, you're already at a 3-year-old causing that conditioning that give them food to stop the crying, to find comfort in food. Like, no, if he's not feeling okay, he wants to cry, let him cry it out. And whenever he's ready, he's going to come back to us, and let him, like, he probably is having a moment, and like, he'll come back. It's normal. Yeah. Like, we want to like comfort them with food, or we do that too. And another thing, it's like, some folks, we drink and then you don't add those calories into your intake.
Yeah.
If at the end of the day, if you have a 2,000 calorie intake,
if you're drinking a 12-pack, you're drinking like what? How many calories?
Well, yeah, like even just a Prosecco, it's 100 calories. Yeah. So if you are, and that's one of the things that when I was learning how to eat, if I was gonna have a carreta like with tequila, that's about 80 to 90 calories. So if I'm gonna have 3, you subtract that from what you're gonna consume all day to make sure that when you're gonna go out, this is your budget. Like, you could only have these because you only allocate it for that amount. Right. So it's really finding those plans and working around it. But then again, I'm not a nutritionist, and I'm not
it works for you. Don't ever take advice from us at all, like, okay?
Don't call me later. I'm like,
you're wrong. I can have like 20 caretas.
Yes.
So let's jump into the employment, the industry. It's a very interesting part because I work with a lot of business owners, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of them talk about that they can't find good employees. They don't want to stay the long term, and they're miserable, and nobody wants to work. What do you see on your end?
So that I hear that all the time, and folks are always saying that I can't find talent, or they're always having to struggle because people don't want to work. And I'm like, well, maybe people don't want to work for like someone that's like a bad boss.
Okay, let's touch on that.
Goes
because
back to ownership.
Yeah, let's touch on that specifically, because I feel, and I get a lot of heat for this, that I'd say that most businesses just aren't good. Am I wrong for saying that?
Most businesses are not good, or
like okay, for example, 10 to 12 million businesses will close every year, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe some of them just aren't good enough businesses, because if you think about it, it always falls back to the business owner, and the business owner is human. Right. So they have human tendencies, and whatever it is, right, it gets into the business.
Yeah.
So that reason, there aren't great people in the world. There are shitty people in the world. There are great people in the world. There's good, there's a little bit of both. So I feel like the businesses also fall into that category. Is there any agreement to that?
Yes. And a lot of the time is because just because it goes, I'm going to give myself as an example, just because I know how to count calories. And I could probably have you go to the gym and we could probably figure it out. And that does not make me like, let me go open up a gym and let me open up a food calorie and food intake, just because now I feel like it's what my expertise are at. And let me go sell these expertise that are trending. And I see that everybody wants to lose weight, and I could probably jump on that bandwagon. But it's not what I do, and it's not my profession, it's not my passion, it's not what I truly am an expert at. So I feel like a lot of times we go into something that it's really not the right fit for us, or we're not the experts at. Or another time is that your employees are telling you and you're not listening. And that's one of the things that I always tell organizations. I'm like, look, first, they're like, it's because we're losing employees left and right. I'm like, okay, well, what are your employees telling you? And they're like, well, we don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, do you do at least an employee engagement post-check survey to check on what they need? Because if an employee leaves for a quarter more, or even less than $1, even $1, they're not leaving because of the money. Because that money goes to taxes. If you're leaving, if you're job hopping for a quarter, you're not going to see that. It's not going to impact your paycheck.
I would argue that most younger employees don't really care.
No,
like they don't even know about it. Like, they don't care about taxes. They know they're going to get some money back in the end. So like leaving for a quarter or $1 more is enticing for them, I would say.
Yeah. Well, they leave because of the culture.
Okay.
Or a lot of times we're like, you know what, I'm not invested or loyal to the organization. I'm not engaged towards the organization, that I'd rather go somewhere else. Because if you are respected, you're engaged, there's development, they allow you to do community outreach, you feel that, one of the things that I tell individuals and organizations, I'm like, look, we build our lives in our workplace. We spend 1/3 of our life in the workplace environment. 40 hours a week at the minimum, we're talking about 160 a month. You don't even spend 160 hours with your family.
Yeah.
You don't. So the impact that you have in your workplace. So let's just say you're my boss or I'm your boss and I yell at you and you're having a bad day and you're just dealing with a negative leader. You go into the community, and I always give this this metaphor. Like, you go into the community, you're at the stoplight, and as soon as it turns green, you're that person honking.
Yeah.
It's like, why? What difference is it gonna make in your life or my life that 2 seconds? But your energy level, because you had a bad day at work, now you're transmitting it to the community.
Yeah.
So now you're like, oh, this person, like, what's wrong with them? Like, so you're impacting. Then you get home and you're interacting with your spouse or your children, and chances are you're gonna have this negative, and it just becomes a ripple effect. So it's very important that what you're building and the culture that as a leader that you're developing, that you're creating an environment where your employees say, hey, I do want to go to work and I feel great, and there's growth opportunity. There's they're teaching me. I'm engaged. My leader's asking for feedback, and now they're not going to be able to solve for every pain point. Like, there's going to be like some no's that you're going to own that's just not valid for us, and you tell them why, and you're engaging with your team. But if there's things that might be able to, you could work around into your organization, why not? Mm-hmm. Why not adapt to them?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of business owners are like at the head of the thing, at the head of the helm, and they're like, well, what is an employee going to tell me that I don't already know? And do you come across that a lot? Well,
some leaders are like that. In that sense, there's different type of leaders in a sense. The smart ones usually say, hey, I hire the best talent, let them do and get the recommendations, and I listen to them and I get out of the way. Ultimately, you build and develop that team. But there's going to be challenges, and sometimes you have to work with the leader. Like, it starts from the top. So you can't be expecting, and some folks say, hey, this is how I run my ship, and well, good luck. You're going to have, chances are you're going to be really like losing and spending money on attrition and trying to retain your employees. Yeah. And the time and the funds that it takes you to train someone, to hire, the investment, whether you're using a third-party agency or you're having your HR team and your talent and acquisition recruit, to training. Now, it takes at least like 3 to 6 months for an employee to really be fully onboarded, to be actually functional, at full or invested. But then if you're losing them, it's like, okay, well, let's start again
and invest in that.
Yeah, and there's another, I'm not going to say that I'm an expert or a calculator that goes back to, I don't know the exact math, but there's actually a calculator there that I use in a sense. Like, for example, if the employee earns $75,000, anytime that you lose them, it's about 1.5 of the cost of having to hire someone. And I say, this is research that I've done. There's a lot of larger, more organizations that I gathered in, things like SHRM, McKinsey, them that have these tools available for us that, hey, well, if you lose someone that's at the annual rate of this is how much you're investing in having to retain and hire.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so let's stay on the subject of leadership. What are the top 3 skills that a leader needs?
3, resourceful. I believe like any leader that's resourceful, because they're always going to find ways. For me, is the growth, for them to be very growth mindset thinking, in a sense that this is where we're going, and not just because we did it the same way in the past 10 years, we're going to continue. And I would empathetic, and for them to really be able to sympathetic towards situations.
Let's stay on empathy, because I've been told that I lack empathy. I don't feel I lack empathy. How does one find empathy?
Well, it's really one, knowing your team and then building relationships with them. But then also for me, it's like, okay, I always think about my mom. Like, how would I want a leader to treat my mom at her work? Okay. And relate to that. And for me, it's like, I don't have kids. So relating to someone that has kids and maybe has a single mom with 2 or 3 kids, and that's a really good tool that you just said. You want the leader to treat like your mom. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So those are, just think about like that, this special person, then we create a ripple effect of like, it becomes a domino effect. If you make an impact in one person, that person can go and make that impact to other individuals. And hopefully it just comes full circle. But it goes back to, I might not be able to really understand everything that goes behind. I'm able to manage my schedule very well because, well, I don't have kids and I build a system around that. But for example, someone that does, that doesn't mean that for that person most valuable thing might be to be able to go to their kids' recital at 5:30.
Yeah.
And if you leave at 6, just imagine if you give that opportunity to that person to say, okay, you know what, leave at 4:30. But if you have a chance, can you log in later on? We still have work pending. That person might log in at 7 p.m., 7:30, and even do more work than what they were expected, just because they have they're grateful towards you because you get them given the opportunity for them to show up to their kids' recital. So you start navigating. And I know that there's some that are very hey, we need to have someone on shift, but it's communicating. Shift swaps are great. Building a village within your team, create that sense and really build that communication.
We live in a world where everybody has feelings. Everybody takes them to work. Everybody's doing stuff. Everybody's going everywhere. How do you navigate the feelings parts of work related, and then when you come into work you leave your feelings behind? How do you navigate that? Because it's a very it's a very strange thing to talk about, especially when you have an employee, right? I would feel for most business owners that they try to leave that part separate because we want to respect that side. This is work. This is personal. How do you navigate that?
Well, it is a little bit challenging in a sense where I, as an individual, my personal and my work life still coexist. Why? Because I'm an individual that I could potentially be working on a Sunday 5 hours because I had to stop working during the week because I went to go take my nephew somewhere or wanted to be part of something. So they coexist, and I have that flexibility of being able to adapt. But when it comes to the emotions, sometimes we hear the leave your backpack at home.
Yeah.
But we're not robots. At the end of the day, for example, if someone is dealing with something at home and they come to work and they bring it, there might not be working at 100%, or you're not having that conversation as to, hey, you might be impacting. How can we help you be successful? How can we help you be functional? Is there anything that we could help you maybe take the day? Have those relationships and build that. Another time, it's, for example, not just feelings, but I'm not sure if you've read the book, The 5 Love Languages.
No, I have not.
Okay, well, there's the 5 love languages where you find out, okay, how am I loving my family, or how do I receive love and how do I give love? And the way that you give is not the same way that you receive, but there's the 5, whether the ones that it's touch, acts of service, words of affirmation. I'm missing 2 other ones. Well, there's a book within the same kind of theme, but in the workplace. So as a leader, you might be providing or giving motivation or trying to inspire your team a certain way, but in reality, that's not their way. So knowing your team and learning of what really focuses them and what really motivates them and what really empowers to do better, it's going to help you identify, how do I support my team in that aspect? Do I give them the empowerment words, or do I give them the acts of service? Hey, you know what? Yeah, you could leave early, or development. But the whole leave emotions, I get it. Maybe you're not going to be crying because at the end of the day, we're functional. We have to perform and we have to come in a sense, but they're not going to just shut down. And being able to be very mindful of that. Another time is, for example, being able to, our egos. And a lot of times that's where, and those are going back to microaggressions. So, and I know the whole DE&I aspect and unconscious bias and microaggressions, sometimes we do things that will prevent the success of the organization or the team and it goes as simple as, let's just say, someone sends you an email, but your ego, you just had a disagreement with them. And you're like, you know what? I'm not going to respond to that email till later. And those are our emotions, because either you had a conflict and you haven't resolved it with that buddy or peer of yours, and you're so now we're delaying.
So how do you let go of that ego?
It's really identifying what the bigger cost is. And it's a challenge, but it's really working in partnership in a sense where, one, it's acknowledging and owning that we have one. Because anybody that tells you that they don't have one, and I'm like, oh, we should start there. Like,
you got the worst one.
I'm like, yes, because I've heard the whole, like, I don't have an ego. I'm like, okay, well, let's start. Let's go back to basics.
Yeah.
But when and it goes back to unconscious bias. I've heard so many times, or even privilege, when people are like, I don't have any privilege. And I'm like, oh, the fact that you and I are having the conversation, we have a privilege.
Yeah.
And, or I don't have any biases. And I'm like, well, the fact that you're not aware that you have them, we need to start there. But our egos, it's okay, we're working for a bigger purpose for the organization. And we're, a lot of times organizations build their vision plan and their strategy, but they don't know how to bring it to life to the frontline level. And I go back to the stories, and I'm not going to say I make all these up, but it says, there was a story, and I believe, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get this right, but one of our presidents, and I think it was JFK, when he visited NASA, where he went and he was walking around when they were building some kind of, something was being built to go somewhere into galaxy. I think it was the moon. He asked the janitor, what do you do here? And he's like, I'm sending a man to the moon. The janitor, in his mind, all the way, he knew that he was part of the bigger purpose of sending someone. I know at one of the stadiums, and I'm not sure exactly which one, but the persons that clean the stadium, they'll tell you like, we are winning championships. Like, so the vision, what is it that you do here within the organization? We're winning championships.
So how do you get people to buy into that then? How do you get people to buy into your organization? Like, this is what we do. This is where we're going to go. Is it as simple as like having those setting expectations in the beginning? How does that work?
It takes time. And it always starts from the leader all the way to the bottom. And a lot of times the disconnection is in the middle management, because sometimes the leaders create a strategy, or we've seen organizations with 26 values. And you're like, well, name them. Yeah. And the board or the executives can't even name the 5 of the values. Why do you need 26 values? Like, stick to what your organization truly does. And it doesn't say like, and hire people that fit those values that showcase. And I know that sometimes you're like, you don't want to like do a culture fit in a sense where like, you're just going to hire someone that looks exactly or works exactly. No, but I hire based on the values. Like, this is what our organization represents. And when I hire individuals, I make sure that they're living up to these values that we set.
So are you saying to hire for value versus skill?
Well, no. You always want to make sure that, for example, that you have the best candidates. But for example, anytime that you're already interviewing, they already come with the competencies. So now, now which one demonstrates the values and it's going to fit your organization?
I got you.
So that's where, and it goes back to always with the whole diversity thing and the misconception that they're like, it's you're just trying to do give more Latinos or give more Blacks or women's or more given the position just because they meet a check mark. Right. It's like, no, you always hire for skills and for competency, but you expand your net to who you're recruiting to. But if you're telling me you're bringing me 10 men and there's a women college out there next door and you haven't even like built a relationship to recruit or for them to make it enticing for them to come to work for us, we might want to start there. Right. But at the end of the day, you're still going to hire for the best skilled and the best participant that applying for their application for the role, not just because they made criteria.
I got you. Yeah. Is there a difference in employees here in the Rio Grande Valley versus out of the Rio Grande Valley? Because we live in a bubble, right? I've been told we live in a bubble. Yeah.
I'm like, no, we're all, the same problems we're having, they're having them everywhere.
I would say that because even like in real estate, they say that we're insulated. The Rio Grande Valley is very insulated. You know, the Rio Grande Valley has our own culture, right? Do you see a difference in employees in the Rio Grande Valley versus out Texas and then nationwide?
I think any area is going to be different. Like even for example, and you might think in a sense like I worked for T-Mobile for a long time and the customer care and they're like, it's because they're saying I have an accent. Everybody has an accent. Yeah. We all do. If you hear someone from Bronzeville and you hear someone from Roma, we're all going to sound different. Mm-hmm. Even within our region, there's cultures, there's beliefs that we build around that area. If you go outside, San Antonio has a certain way. Austin has another. When you compare Austin and Houston, it's even the way that they dress, the way that they work, their activities. It's going to be different. And the Valley, we are different. But my personal belief, it's like that in every location. But at the end of the day, we're all humans. At the end of the day, we all want to be respected. We want to feel value. We want to make sure that we're going into an environment that I don't have to. And that there's another. There I go again with another quote. But there's that quote as to how your gut and heart feels on Sunday before you go to work on Monday determines on whether you're invested or feel happy about going to work the next day.
Yeah, because most people dread going to work on Monday, and some people are just like...
Imagine you're dreading 160 hours of your month. Like, just put that into perspective.
I would say that's most people.
Yeah.
Do you see that on your end?
Yes and no. Yes, I've had the opportunity to work with really great teams that they're invested and they're doing in their organization and in their role. I'm not saying that I'm like, there's other things that you also enjoy, but there has to be like, why are you sticking to something? Why would you stay into an organization or a career for 160 hours a month?
Because of the pay.
But because of the pay, okay, well, I'm pretty sure you're still overspending or having way too much on. What is it that you're willing to sacrifice in a sense of like, or look up for other opportunities?
Yeah.
There's other great opportunities that you could do.
Yeah, I've come to the realization, like, I had to really think about like the next 5 years. And I ask this question to a lot of people. It's like, what are you going to be doing in the next 5 years? If you really think about what you're going to be doing in the next 5 years, and say you want to go to college and get like an MBA or whatever, right? Those next 5 years, the outcome of it outweighs everything that you're doing in the short term. I don't think people really think about that. Can you kind of touch on that?
I could, and it goes back to the way that I talk about the sacrifices that you make it throughout your life, or the whole instant gratification and the whole sense of like being comfortable with being bored for the long term. I mentioned I would work, and when I was doing my undergrad, I was working the whole 3 to 12 and only off Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I would work the weekends. I worked the Super Bowl days. I was working, but because I had a bigger picture and I was willing to invest that time, and I knew, okay, where I was heading and what I was going to want to do. And I sacrificed that. And some people, and I don't want to say that it was a sacrifice, but it was part of the plan. Where sometimes we see it like, okay, well, I'm not going to see my kids if I invest a little bit more hours on being able to study extra, but what are you going to gain once you get there? Yeah. And sometimes we get bored or we disengage before we stay consistent.
Why do you think that way? Because the reason I ask is because I could go home driving today and I could die in a car accident. And the future is, who cares?
Yeah,
I think that's what a lot of people's mentality, because I thought that too. Is like when I was working out and lifting weights and eating correctly. Yeah, I was like, everybody's like, why don't you just eat the donut? You could like die tomorrow. Like, who cares? Like, so I had to switch my mind and like, you know what? The quality of the life I have now versus what I'm going to do long term. Like the quality of the life I have now going into like 90s, whatever, right? I want that quality of life to be good. So it doesn't matter if I die tomorrow, I'll at least look good.
No, and you actually have a great way to think about it. And it goes back to, I believe, and in my personal, I could only speak, and I'm not going to say I'm going to speak for the Latinos or the Mexican or the Valley folks, but speaking on my own and my family. But I'm not sure if you hear it, but, ay, por si te mueres. Like, ¿y si nos morimos mañana? Yeah. And I go, what if you don't? I'm like,
yeah. Chances are you're not.
Statistically, and let's talk numbers. And I would go back to, I'm a numbers person, but what percentage of your family members did die before 40?
Yeah, not very many.
Or before 50?
Yeah.
So now you're starting to like just statistics. You could be an outlier.
Sure.
Okay, you know what? It happens, but at least if it happens, I'm gonna be in my best, healthiest way. Yeah. And it goes back to what you're adding value and to what you define as to the whole going out and the drinking. And don't get me wrong, I've explored it and I've done it, and
it's fun. I started incorporating a little bit of drinking on the weekend. But
I could go to Vegas and be in bed by like 10 p.m. because for me it's just a different location and it's great. But I don't want to have to be recovering or having to, I know a lot of people enjoy it, but that's their why. Yeah. And it's not good or bad. It's just the way their circus. If in my circus, and if you want to come and be part of my circus, well, let's do this. And finding those middle grounds with family members, with folks that I might not want to join that night shift at the circus.
Yeah. Is there such a thing as work-life balance?
Oh, 100%.
So explain that.
Yes. And I go back to, I'm like, it's stop trying to put it into one box of what it's supposed to look like. I get more anxiety if I were to go on a trip and completely disconnect for 3 days, because my inbox is going to come back and I'm already anticipating what's pending, like what's in my inbox or what I have to respond. I rather, and for example, when I go to conferences, it goes back to blending your life. I go to conferences or trainings. I always ask a friend, hey, does anybody want to join me? I'm going to be these dates in this place. Do you want to go? If I have to go to a conference, I work around with my mom or my sister. Is there any way that maybe you all can fly with me? And I'm going to go to the conference. You all do what you got to do, but I'll meet with y'all afterwards. Oh, I recently took my nephew to the Gaylord Resort and I had to fly to Tennessee. So I'm like, okay, well, we're going to go Friday through Sunday. You all come back to the Valley and I'm going to go back to, so it blended my work and my family time. So it's finding those sense where like, and then also finding the support system that my family is comfortable with. Like if I wake up and I'm like, let me do an hour of work, or I'm going to go to the office on Sunday. I'll see you all at 5, like even for Super Bowl. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to see you all at 5 because I'm going to go I do my recordings for my videos. I do them on Sunday. It's the day that works for me. And we balance around that. So.
Yeah. You touched on something interesting, conferences. Ongoing education, I find fascinating. Like, I can't find mentors anywhere. It's very hard for me to find mentors, and I reach out to a lot of people. A lot of them simply just don't have time. So with AI, I just like replicated them. But also, on the other end, is I'm always trying to find conferences to go to learn from people, because there is nothing better than spending $500 or $1,000 on a 3-day, 2-day conference where they teach you all of their accumulated knowledge over the past 20 years. Can you kind of touch on that? Because I don't think people really understand the power of that.
For me, personally, I'm not going to have enough time to make every mistake. And I'm not, and I don't want to be the type of person in the sense like no, until I do it and until I learn, I'm going to learn. It's like, I like to hear what people say, like, hey, you know what, if I do this and that, this is what happened. Like, let me share some best practices or ideas. Or I cannot even say that they have other ways that you might not think. You might have those blind spots that I might have just been seeing it in the certain A through B, but in reality, we go A through S. This is going to improve. For me, there's so many great resources. And if you don't have the $1,000 or the travel, or you're not in a company that gives you the opportunity to gain that, online, we have the online
YouTube University.
YouTube, yes.
I'm a straight A student.
Yes.
YouTube University.
Now, always check your resources,
of course.
And because sometimes we hear things, and I'm like, oh, someone said, like, I'm gonna.
Yeah, but there's only a very few people that I follow on YouTube. I scoured through a lot of them to make sure that they were the top people to learn from, and I feel like you at least need to have like 5 mentors that are talking like finances, wealth, health, love, stuff like that, right?
And be comfortable with being a student. I think sometimes we try to be an expert at everything, and we think that be comfortable with the fact that you want to be able to hear from others, like what has worked and what hasn't. And not just because it worked in that industry. You can't just imply the cookie cutter approach and put it in another region or industry, or
it's just not that easy.
It's not that easy. But the constant learning for me, and my friends were like, they always tell, I'm at the Stairmaster and I'm with the book, but I always have a book with me. I'm always reading, listening to a podcast, and some of them I don't connect, and some of them I don't relate, and I'm like, that doesn't.
You just need that little golden nugget. That one little golden nugget will do wonders.
Yes, and you just explore, and I always challenge people, because they're like, oh, we don't have enough time in the day, and the reason that I say this is because I did it as myself. I checked how much time I was investing in social media on my phone, and your phone can tell you. So I'm not a master. Just find out. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, go to your screen time and find out how much you're investing on Instagram and on Facebook and on all these social media. And I'm like, based on the facts. I'm like, look, you don't have to lie to me, but go to the facts.
Yeah.
And you start finding that, and you realize, like, oh, I was investing at a minimum 20 hours in a week.
Wow.
What can you do with 20 hours in a week? Like what else can you actually be doing?
You can learn a whole new skill.
A whole new skill. You could be listening, or even just learning how to interact with different generations, or there's tips for everything.
Yeah, I don't think people understand that there's people that consume social media and there's people that use social media. Like, for example, I use social media all the time. I'm always posting something. And people are like, you're on social media all the time. I was like, no, I'm really never on social media. I just pop on there and then do whatever I'm going to do. And then I'm out. And I'll check it later.
Not scrolling unintentionally.
Because sometimes I will sit there like on the weekend just scrolling. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, close that. Like, close it as fast as you can. So it's a very interesting thing how social media is made to be able to hook you in and keep you there.
Yeah. And it's the whole... and it goes back to like, it just keeps you, and it's going back into you're already on cruise control when you're on the app. Because sometimes I've done that, and it's one thing that I'm trying to get better at, that sometimes I just open it just to see, but it's a back to like just be doing it on cruise control. It's like I told you, I stopped drinking Celsius because I think I was just drinking Celsius for the past 15 years. Out of habit. Just because it was part of my routine. I would add it to my grocery list. I was just automatically an automate when it came to that. Yeah. So we do that. It's just a tick that we're like, okay, let me scroll. Oh, when we're driving, that's another one that I'm always super scared of. But, like those are things that it's like, did you really need to check? Like, can you just wait? That's how addicting it is. Yes. It's crazy. It's interesting. Let me share with you something. So this is a timeline of life, right? Okay. And 0 to 100. Let's just assume that I will live to 100, right? So I'm out to 42, done, right? So this is what I got left. Hopefully, I will get to live as old as my grandpa, which is 93. Maybe not, maybe 90. So take that. This is all the time that I have left in this world. Yeah. And I would say at least to 65 years old, which is about there, is when I will be a competent male that will give back to the workforce, give back to life, give back to my family. And after that, it'll start slowing down. Yeah. So this is all the time that I have left to have a meaningful impact on the world that I have. How do you view time?
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
For me, time is extremely valuable. And it goes back to being on time. For me is really identifying, like even like being comfortable with like, if you're going to rest, this is my rest time, and really cherish it. And I go back to sometimes my mom, she's like, oh, do you want to go see your nephew? And depending on how I'm feeling or how my work has been, or I had to tell her once, I was like, oh no, I'm scheduled to see him on a Tuesday, and probably it was on a Friday, Saturday. And she's like, well, you don't want to see him today? And I'm like, I would love to see him today, but if I see him today, I'm not going to give him the best of me because I'm tired. Yeah. And I need to recover and rest today. I'm already scheduled to see him on Tuesday, and I'm already prepared mentally, and I'm going to give him my best at that point. And when it comes to time, you want to be very mindful of like, I'm not just going to go to somewhere just because I'm going to go, or be comfortable with owning the no. And I go back to owning anything that you do, from the food that you eat, from the events that you go. Don't just go if it doesn't relate to you, like, or because you're friends. And I'm like, well, how is that going to relate to me? Can I just take like, I'm going to sit this one down and we'll regroup and see others, because that's something that we cannot gain back. Once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people have told me like I'm super selfish, like with time, and I feel like I have to be. Like, is being selfish a bad thing?
I don't think it's selfish. Unfortunately, we just have a bad like connection as to how much you value the time, and be intentional of like, when I'm with you, I want to make sure that I'm providing you my best, and this is the time that we have available. I don't want you to come and you're not your best either, or it's going to create more stress in your schedule because you made the decision to come visit me today. Versus we could have been comfortable with like jumping on a call or jumping on a FaceTime or a Zoom and not adding more stress to us. So it's being able to be comfortable. I think selfish, it's like selfish and like in a sense of like greedy, like in that aspect. But if you're being transparent, you're setting your expectations, you're owning your day. At the same time, it's both ways. You're being respectful of each other. But a lot of times, and I'm going to go back to having crucial conversations, because it's, for example, when it comes to the whole religion and politics, how many times do we hear we've been trained and conditioned not to have religion conversations and politics conversations. And we're like, well, why not? I'm like, well, we haven't been developed to have crucial conversations with one another. And it goes back to, like, for example, the inclusion part in the DE&I aspect that I do. It's like, well, whatever gives you peace of mind at night and helps you go to sleep, and whoever you want to pray to, that's on you. And that doesn't mean that I can't respect you and value you and see the great things that you have as an individual. And the reason that I say that is because two of my greatest friends, one is into religions, one is not, and they're very comfortable because I always share these stories when I say it. I'm like, we have conversations, we interact, we support each other, we're there for like each other when like things go bad, but we all have different political views and we all have religion views. And be comfortable with being with someone it's not the same as you.
Yeah, I feel like most people don't take the time to have conversations or even go further to think about what they want to talk about and converse about. Because if you really think about it, like if you sit down with your friends and you have actual conversations about life, your life will only get better.
Yeah, and not only just your friends, but people that are not the same as you. Like being able to see it into others' perspective. And sometimes it's like when I work with organizations, they're like, it's because I have leader A not communicating with the front line and they're different generations. And I'm like, hey, only because you were wanting to work the 100 hours a week, that doesn't mean that your employee, maybe they found ways to do it a lot faster without having to be at work for 100 hours, and they're still going to develop the task. So generations, so if everybody looks the same around you, you're really not expanding. And it's really being curious about like, okay, well, let me see what others believes, and it might work for me or it might not work for me. And also, I'm not going to try to convince you to try to follow the things that I do. Like, I'm going to share what works for me, but it's up to you whether you decide, hey, let me learn a little bit more what route I want to go with.
Yeah. Let's talk about opportunities. I feel like a lot of people won't take opportunities when they come, either because of culture or relationships or something like that, or family. How do you feel about opportunity? Because sometimes opportunity comes and people just pass it by like another one's going to come. Well, that shit doesn't come very often.
Yeah.
So can you kind of touch on the opportunity? Like, you have the opportunity of a lifetime now with the time that you have, the little time that you have to do what you're going to do in this life. Kind of touch on that.
Well, I think it's also the double-edged sword of always being on a student or always trying to be preparing. Like, I'm not ready for it, or let me continue preparing, or not being comfortable with being an amateur at a new role or at a new job.
Because of fear of failure.
Because of fear of failure. And it goes back to having that leader and having that folk that's around you, or that person that you're going to report to, that I know a lot of times leaders say, like, I don't want to hear about the problem, just bring me the solutions. But hey, if there's any way that you could collaborate, and if I could help you fix that problem in the half of the time that you're going to be investing trying to solve it, or if you messed up, and I remember when I was a people leader, and I would say, hey, if you told a customer something that you weren't supposed to, you come to me and you tell me, because once that customer leaves, you're on your own, because then it's either gonna come back through a certain way, through an audit, but if something happened, I'm gonna help you fix it, and we'll figure it out together. But it goes back to always like building that relationship, and always when opportunities come, be like, okay, well, how do I build that safe space as to, hey, that reassurance of, okay, I checked box, I prepared, and one of the things is also, one of my favorite phrases is, I won't overcommit and underperform. So I'm also not gonna like hype up myself to ascend like, yeah, I could be a trainer and I go build a whole team and I'm like, and then underperform. Also it goes back to owning your competencies and your skills and what you're great at and what you do know well and going after that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of like entrepreneurs and business people have like a shiny object syndrome. Like they've had success in one thing. It's like, I can do all these other things too. And then they fail miserably. Like I've done it before. Like I've done multiple projects. It's like, shit, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Cause there's just not enough time in the world. Yeah. Like at all. You can't invest in this stuff.
And you might be able to try it, but as a hobby, you know what? Like, just because I'm great at doing something that I use as self-care or like mental, that doesn't mean that I want to do it as for work or my functional my functional task.
Yeah, let's talk about AI in the workplace. I've been taking some emerging technology classes from UTRGV, and one of the things I'm learning in that is that in the next 10 years, probably 5, we'll have a manager in the box that will be helping your whole business function where you just have to work on the business strategies only. And this whole manager in the box is going to do everything for you. It's going to get rid of your employees. And the reason I want to talk about this is because Facebook 2 years ago got rid of 20,000 employees. LinkedIn got rid of 10,000. Citibank's getting rid of 10,000. The emergence of AI in businesses today is growing at a rapid speed. It's kind of mind-boggling, but it gives hope to like business owners like me that want to build like $100 million business with a very small team. What are your thoughts on that?
I think AI is a great tool and resource, but it's, for example, I know a lot of folks are scared of AI or the jobs that are going to be lost. I'm like, look, at the end of the day, it's a resource. Like just Google. When Google came out, I'm sure there was all this fear, but we all have access to Google. That doesn't mean we're all using it at the same time. If you don't have the work ethic, if you don't have the follow through, if you don't commit, if you get distracted with another new shiny, there's not going to be consistent on anything that you do. So for example, just like you mentioned, all these layoffs, I challenge you, go to LinkedIn. How many open roles are available? Thousands, even just in the DE&I space. And I know that's because DE&I has gotten a backlash, but there's probably at least 10,000 remotely.
Wow.
So, there's always going to be this, if you want to blame it on the environment, well, there's all these jobs being lost in the economy, but you're really not putting like your work and doing the consistency and staying on track to what you do. You're blaming the circumstances, and there's ways. AI is going to help you, and it's going to be very, very beneficial. But at the end of the day, if someone's going to take your job, it's the person that's using the AI, not the AI.
I 100% agree with you. Before we finish off the podcast, going into the future, what are the top skills that people need to have going into the workplace for the next 5 and 10 years?
That one's an interesting one. And I cannot say, for me, it's being resourceful. Why? Because whenever you have an individual that it's not going to just drown when a cup is getting filled, or when things are going to be throwing left and right, or for them to figure out ways to adapt and be flexible with the change. That's things that I value. For me, it's the competencies of being able to have the follow through. Those are things that I look into. And then, of course, someone that is going to be not just loyal to the brand in a sense, but always making sure that they're doing the right thing. You really cannot outbeat doing the right thing.
And to add on to that, I would feel like even the soft skills, like the conversation skills that we're having now, is like most people don't have that.
Oh, well, most people don't know how to have conversations.
So give them some tips right now. Like, what are some practical tips that somebody can take home after they read this or listen to this? What practical skills can they have? Yeah,
well, and we see it all the time where you see these personas online, but then you see them on out events, and it's like, whenever you see them, like when you interact, you're like, well, hold on, like, or they're not able to just have it's okay, like, we don't have to document, like, let's just have lunch, like, let's just relax. And it goes back to really finding what really connects with the other person. I would really challenge individuals, read. I'm a big reader. That's what helps me. Read, listen into podcasts. You can go bad with. There's a lot of experts in that aspect. Gather insights. Listen from sports. Become well versed, not just in one thing, but find different topics.
Awesome.
Always stay learning.
Yeah, always be learning. All right, guys. I'd like to thank you all coming on to the sesh. We'll see y'all next time. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.